I'm Shelby from Education Elements. I'm a former educator who became a policy researcher, who became a consultant. And what that means is so much of the guidance that I give to school leaders and school district leaders is driven by my belief that data play an important role in the decisions we make, and therefore in the educational experiences of our students and their families. In this video, I'm going to talk about how a theory of action can be a great way to identify the right indicators to measure progress in your strategic plan. We'll also talk about how data can be a critical input that you need for executing the strategies that you have included in your plan. First, I want to tell you about my son. He's 8 years old, and like many of the kids across the country, we started second grade this year at home. And my husband and I both work, and so we decided we needed Miles to be more independent and more self-reliant so that we could focus the time we did have to spend with him on helping him with his schoolwork. So we set a goal. We felt like, in particular, he could be more independent in the mornings. Then we made a list of the decisions that he would need to make on his own. He would need to decide when to wake up. He would need to decide what to wear. He would need to decide what kinds of resources and materials he needed for the day. We identified the kind of information he would need that he doesn't always have right now. He doesn't always know what time it is. He doesn't always know what the weather is. And so we knew we needed to get him that information. And the final decision we had to make was the best way to get him that information so that he understood it on his own. He didn't need any interpretation from us, and it would empower him to make those decisions for himself. A theory of action is a logical chain of reasoning that lays out how a set of practices will produce results that have a desired impact. A theory of action can also build confidence that the changes we're seeing are actually attributed to the program that we implemented, creating a causal correlation. They evaluate things like fidelity of implementation. How accurately did we implement what we planned to? What was the effectiveness of that program? Did it produce the results we were intending to see? And what's the impact of those results? Did it have the lasting impact or the long-term impact that we thought it would whenever we decided to implement that program to begin with? Let's apply this framework back to the story about my son. Our theory of action was that if we could give him access to the time of day, the materials that he needed for the day, and access to the weather, that he could get himself ready in the morning, and that might inspire more independence and self-reliance in other parts of his life as well. Some indicators that we could use to evaluate how that theory of action is going, we could look at fidelity. We could evaluate how many mornings he's actually getting access to that information. Can he get the information? Can he understand it without us? We could look at effectiveness. Is that actually leading to him getting ready by himself most mornings? And then we can look at some impact indicators, like, are we actually seeing independence and more self-reliance in other parts of his life as well? In any strategic plan, there's going to be critical pieces of information that you have to make available to the people that you're asking to execute against these strategies. And it's important to ask, as a strategic planning team, what is that information and how do we make it available to them? For example, if one of the strategies in your strategic plan is to provide more personalized learning experiences for your students, what information do teachers need about those students in order to make those personalized instruction decisions to improve those engagement experiences? Now, let's practice writing a theory of action. Think about a program that you want to implement. List the specific changes you'd like to see by implementing that program and what you think those long-term impacts could be as a result of those changes. If you have time, think about some indicators that you could pay attention to decide whether or not the program was actually implemented with fidelity or as you intended, whether or not those changes you wanted to see are happening, and to get a sense of what the long-term impact of those changes are. Thanks so much for watching. As a recap, we talked today about how a theory of action can help you make sure that you identify the right indicators to measure progress in your strategic plan. One thing to keep in mind, this theory of action, it's important to revisit it to make sure that the one you originally wrote still makes sense for your team and for your district. A great way to do that is through a retrospective. We've included a helpful video here that can help you facilitate a conversation like that with your team. Thanks so much.
Hi, I'm Daniel Johnson from Education Elements. I'm a former teacher who became an education consultant to help schools and districts become more responsive, dynamic, and agile for their primary users, students and teachers. In this video, I'm going to talk about the importance of ongoing reflection as it relates to strategic planning. I'll share on how we think about ongoing reflection through retrospectives and a few strategies that you can immediately incorporate with your teams. In my first year of teaching, I taught 8 periods of high school chemistry. Nearly every day by the 8th period, the lesson looked almost nothing like the first. I had changed the prompts, shortened or lengthened descriptions, and could preemptively anticipate the points of confusion. Reflection within and across each period on what worked, what didn't, and how to adapt allowed me to fine-tune. And as I taught the subject from year to year, I had opportunities to make larger shifts in my approach, from increasing hands-on learning in labs to utilizing data to drive planning and systems for student goal setting. Whether period to period or year to year, reflection combined with a drive for continued improvement led me to perfect my practice. US General and President Dwight Eisenhower said, "In preparing for battle, I have always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable." I like this quote because it reminds me that we need to approach any strategic planning as a way of thinking, not a set product or plan that has value in and of itself. The apparel retailer Zara has been successful in the last 10 years despite challenges in box store retail and can be seen as a model of this mindset. Zara produces clothing in small batches, the opposite of competitors who order all their inventory for a season. They are constantly collecting feedback on items and restocking inventory based on immediate demand in 2-week cycles. It's allowed them to climb the ranks of the most valuable brands and Forbes 100 list. Whether in retail or school districts, the further ahead teams try to plan and prepare, the less predictable it will be to succeed. Variables like people, resources, priorities, and needs will undoubtedly shift over time, just as we've experienced in the last year as we've navigated a global pandemic. In the context of strategic planning, the practice of the retrospective will help you shift from just having a strategic plan to being a team that more strategically plans. A retrospective is a conversation and data collection on what enabled or prevented a team from hitting work goals so that they can broadly understand 3 things. What should we continue doing? What should we stop doing? And what should we start doing? The information is used to make pivots, adopt new action steps, adjust roles and responsibilities, or improve other aspects or processes. We can think about 2 types of retrospectives and the intentional times they can occur. The first is a step back, an opportunity to review progress and lessons learned. The second is a look ahead, prioritizing and planning next steps based on current circumstances. When designing your strategic plan, it is essential that you consider when and where retrospectives can occur, both for the overall strategic plan and for specific initiatives and priorities outlined within it. For example, step-backs might occur quarterly, while look-aheads might be semesterly or annual. Naming the cadence and purpose of when retrospectives will occur can ensure that reflection and iteration become a part of your practice. Pairing the protocol with the purpose is critical. For a step back, a protocol like straws, sticks, and bricks can be a useful way to review progress. Drawing from the fabled 3 Little Pigs, the exercise asks you to consider the elements of your strategic plan that are rock solid, the bricks, things that are pretty solid but could be improved, the sticks, and the things that are hanging together and could collapse at any minute, straws. When looking forward, a feasible, useful matrix can help prioritize potential action steps. Team members start by listing all of the potential solutions and then plotting them based on how realistic and effective each offered solution might be. There are several resources available for conducting retrospectives. We really like the free website funretrospectives.com as a source of inspiration. Now, let's take a moment to reflect. Think about your existing strategic plan or a single initiative within. How could intentionally planned and facilitated retrospectives support your strategic planning? What type of retrospective will you plan? What will you focus it on? If you have time, identify an upcoming opportunity to facilitate this retrospective. Thanks so much for watching. As a quick recap, we talked today about the importance of retrospectives within any strategic planning process. Keep in mind that your ability to reflect and iterate on your plan is as important as having a plan itself. Bye, everyone.
Hi, I'm Kelly Friet from Education Elements. Prior to joining Education Elements over 5 years ago, I played the role as a blended learning teacher in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. There, I co-designed learning experiences for middle school science students and realized through the conversations with my teammates that decision-making was one thing we had to continue to work on. In this video, I'm going to challenge you to embrace the unknown and think about a practice that's going to allow your strategic plan to move forward. Encourage you to follow along and look forward to seeing the magic that happens. There's a big possibility that you've already made thousands of decisions already today. Cornell University did a study that showed humans make over 221 decisions just on food in a given day. If you think about it, we wonder why we get so paralyzed when by the end of the day, we can't decide what we want to have for dinner, what we're going to read before bed, or even do we sit in silence? The skill of making decisions happens over time, especially when we're faced with many different decisions. The problem we can anticipate with strategic planning is many groups get in the cadence of bringing together their groups of people for countless amounts of hours to move forward a discussion. We have witnessed leaders leaving those meetings with more questions than answers. As an organization, we really need to begin to shift our practices to be more self-managed, to distribute the power, and to avoid that false promise of consensus. As district leaders and community members are creating the strategic plan, we at Education Elements encourage them to take on the mindset of safe enough to try. This phrase was adapted from holacracy. Instead of consensus with making decisions, it's a learn by doing approach that involves decision making as a team. When you learn to make decisions quickly and model the right purpose of that decision, people, information, and the level of risk, the model is an approach that allows all important roles to have a say in the decision making process. This process leads to something that is more passive to more active, from fuzziness to clarity, and most of all, from being a participant to being an owner. It just spreads the decision-making power and ownership across a team. And lastly, we find that makes the assumption that all decisions made will only move an organization forward versus harming an organization. As you are making progress towards your strategic plan, we understand that if a leader or community member were to come to the group already with a solution, tension might arise. We also know, on the other hand, if you were to come to the meeting and say, what should we do? It sets up the whole strategic planning process core team to lead into hours and hours of discussion. Our team knows that the most successful strategic plans involve community involvement, early on and continuously. This governance structure that we're about to share with you will show you how to present a proposal and structure it in a way that allows voice to be involved, along with that, decisions to be made. Number 1, state facts. 2, state your interpretation. 3, summarize and state the importance of approving or removing the initiative for this instance. 4th, start by sharing the proposal. And lastly, invite others to provide that feedback that you're looking to seek more information from. After the individual has presented the proposal, the facilitator will aim for safe enough to try, not consensus. There will be time and space for individuals within that meeting to ask clarifying questions and to provide reactions prior to making that decision. At Education Elements, we always advise that the facilitator anticipate equal talk time for this portion of the governance structure. After the proposal has been shared, go around the entire team and allow each person to answer the question, does anyone have data that indicates that this proposal is unsafe to try? The facilitator needs to anticipate and parse through what information is valid enough to actually have a discussion around. When teams and community members continue to see themselves as decision makers and see themselves getting closer to their priorities on the strategic plan, we have seen that these teams end up staying more motivated, go faster, and are more likely to continue to engage in the process. I want you to take time to pause and reflect and think about the decisions your team has made around your strategic plan. Most of all, ask yourself, what governance structures are in place that allow your team to be able to pivot throughout the process? Thank you so much for watching. For more content from Education Elements, I encourage you to check out our Twitter page and website. If you enjoyed this content, most of all, check out YouTube.